You know exactly what happened. You remember how it ended. The conversation, or the absence of one. The moment you understood it was over. The days that followed. The particular weight of those days. The way ordinary things like making coffee or driving to work suddenly felt unbearable because everything was laced with the fact that this person was gone. You lived through all of that. You survived it. You told yourself, and maybe you told other people, that you were done. That you had learned. That whatever that relationship was, you were not going back to it. And then something happened. A message. A moment of weakness at 2 in the morning. A conversation that reminded you of everything good, everything you missed, everything that felt irreplaceable. And the door you thought you had closed opened again. And now you're either back with your ex, or you're thinking about it, or you have done it before and are trying to understand why. Why that pull exists. Why someone who hurt you still has that kind of gravity. Why knowing better does not seem to produce doing better. This video is not here to tell you that going back to an ex is always wrong. It is not that simple, and pretending it is would be dishonest. What this video is here to do is help you understand what is actually happening inside you when that pull exists, because the pull itself, where it comes from and what it is made of, tells you something important about yourself that is worth understanding. Let's get into it. The first thing to understand is that the pull back to an ex who broke your heart is not irrational. It feels irrational from the outside. Friends look at you and cannot understand it. You look at yourself and cannot always understand it. But it is not random. It is not weakness in the simple sense. It is your nervous system doing something very specific, and understanding what that something is changes everything. Human beings do not fall in love with people. They fall in love with experiences, the specific cocktail of feelings a particular person produces. The person is the vehicle. The experience is what gets under the skin. When a relationship ends, the neural pathways built during it do not dissolve. They remain active, which is why a song, a smell, a particular kind of afternoon light can activate the full emotional weight of a relationship long after it has ended. The brain does not distinguish cleanly between memory and present experience. When a memory is activated strongly enough, the body responds as if it is happening now. The longing for your ex is not just a thought about the past. It is a physiological event. Your nervous system is responding to the reactivation of a pattern it learned to associate with home. And that word, home, is where the trauma piece enters. For most people who find themselves pulled repeatedly back to someone who hurt them, the relationship did not just feel good. It felt familiar. And familiar and good are not the same thing. But the nervous system, particularly the part of the nervous system shaped in early childhood, does not always distinguish between the two. In childhood, before we have language or conscious memory, we develop what psychologists call an attachment template, a blueprint built from our earliest relationships with caregivers that tells us what love feels like. This template is not a decision. It is an absorption formed from repeated experience before we are old enough to evaluate it. If your early experience of love included unpredictability, warmth followed by withdrawal, closeness followed by emotional unavailability, the experience of needing someone who is not always there, your attachment template was built around that pattern. Not because you chose it, because it was the water you swam in. And then, years later, you meet someone who replicates that pattern, who is wonderful sometimes and unavailable at others, who makes you feel deeply seen in some moments and completely invisible in others, who produces the specific emotional intensity that comes from intermittent reinforcement, the neurological equivalent of a slot machine, where the unpredictability of the reward makes the attachment stronger, not weaker. That person does not just feel attractive. They feel familiar in a way that bypasses conscious evaluation. Like home, not because they're good for you, but because they fit the template your nervous system built before you knew you were building it. Going back to that person is not stupidity. It is your nervous system seeking a pattern it recognizes, seeking the feeling it associates with love, even when that feeling is mixed with pain. Seeking resolution, an unconscious hope that this time the pattern will complete differently, that you will finally receive what you needed from someone who emotionally resembles the person who first taught you what love was. That hope is one of the most powerful forces in human psychology, and it is almost always disappointed. The person who fits your wound is not the person who can heal it. They were selected precisely because they match the wound, not because they have the capacity to address it. This is the core of what going back to an ex who broke your heart reveals about your inner world. It reveals that there is a wound, not a character flaw, not a weakness, a wound that is still running in the background, still shaping what feels like love, still pulling you toward the familiar ache of a pattern that predates this relationship entirely. Naming it is not the same as being stuck in it. It is the first step towards something different. Now let's talk about the specific patterns that keep people cycling back, because they are more distinct than they might appear from inside them. The first is the idealization cycle. You leave the relationship, or it ends, and memory immediately begins editing. The painful things recede. The good things become more vivid. You remember the best version of the person and the best moments of the relationship with a clarity and warmth that the relationship itself never quite sustained continuously. The ex you're pulled back to is not the person who is actually there. It is the curated version your memory constructed in their absence. And that version is, understandably, very hard to walk away from. The second is the sunk cost trap. You invested years. You built a life around this person. You imagined a future. Leaving means accepting that all of that is lost, that the years were spent on something that did not work. Going back is unconsciously a way of making the investment not be a loss. If you go back and it works this time, the years are not wasted. They were the path to something that finally became what it was supposed to be. This reasoning feels compelling from inside it. What it misses is that the sunk cost of the past does not determine the value of the future. The third is the pain attachment bond. This is the most counterintuitive and the most important. Pain in relationships does not reduce attachment. It often intensifies it. When a relationship is marked by emotional intensity, by conflict, by uncertainty, by the cycle of rupture and repair, the brain registers that intensity as significance. The relationship feels more important, more real, more irreplaceable than it would if it were simply consistent and safe. The pain becomes part of the love in a way that makes calm, healthy connection feel pale and insufficient by comparison. This is why some people genuinely cannot feel attracted to someone who is simply kind and present and reliable. It does not activate the same intensity. It does not feel like love. It feels like something is missing. What is actually missing is the adrenaline that the brain learned to associate with loving. Understanding which of these patterns is operating for you is genuinely useful, not to feel worse about yourself, but because different patterns require different responses. If it is idealization, the antidote is memory correction, not to demonize the person, but to make yourself remember accurately. Write down specifically what the relationship was actually like, the patterns that repeated, the moments of hurt that you are now editing out, the future you were building toward that had problems you were managing around. Put the full picture on paper and read it when the curated version starts pulling. If it is sunk cost, distinguish past investment from future value. Every day you stay in something that is not right creates a new sunk cost, not a recovery of the old one. The question is never how much you already spent. It is what the next year will cost or give. If it is the pain attachment bond, the antidote is harder because it requires changing what your nervous system registers as love. This is not something that happens through decision or information alone. It happens through experience, repeated experience of safe, consistent, mutual connection that the nervous system gradually learns to associate with love instead of with the intensity it knew before. It happens through therapy, through intentional exposure to different relational experiences, through practicing the tolerance of calm rather than always reaching for the familiar charge. None of these antidotes are fast or simple, but all of them move towards something that going back almost never produces: genuine resolution. Sometimes going back works. Relationships that fail and restart do sometimes find more sustainable footing. People grow. Circumstances change. This is not a fairy tale. But it only works when something fundamental has genuinely changed, not promised to change, not changed in the first hopeful weeks of reconciliation, actually changed in behavior, in pattern, in the underlying dynamics that produce the original hurt. Without that, going back is not a new chapter. It is the same chapter starting over. And you already know how this chapter ends. You lived it. It ended with the particular weight of those days. The way ordinary things became unbearable, the door you thought you had closed. The question we're sitting with is not whether your ex has changed. It is whether you have. Whether you understand the wound that was operating before. Whether you can see the template clearly enough to make a different kind of choice. Not because the pull is not real, but because you have decided that what you want is not the familiar ache of the pattern. You want something that actually gives you what you needed all along. You cannot go back and receive from the past what the past could not give. But you can decide from here to stop offering your present to someone who already showed you what they do with it. Going back to an ex who broke your heart says something about your trauma. It says that the wound is still active, that it is still shaping what feels like love. That some part of you is still hoping that the right amount of love in the right circumstances from the same person will finally produce a different outcome. That part of you is not stupid. It is human. It is the part that learned very early that love comes with conditions, and that maybe if you try hard enough, this time the conditions will finally be met. The truth is that healing does not happen in the relationship that produced the wound. It happens in the work you do to understand the wound, and in the relationships, eventually, that show you something different is possible. You deserve to find out what that feels like. If this video helped you see something more clearly, please like it and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more honest conversations about the things that shape how we love. You already know what happened. Now you know why.